My son looked at me on the morning of his wedding and said, "Dad, I hope you understand that today is about people who have achieved something." Those words stayed with me longer than he will ever know. I stood there quietly, wearing the same simple suit I had worn to countless family gatherings, wondering when my own son had started seeing me as someone who had nothing left to offer. My name is Thomas Reynolds, and for most of my life, I believe that the most important things a person does are not always the things people notice. Sometimes the greatest parts of a person's story are the chapters they never talk about. I arrived at my son Ryan's wedding with a smile on my face because I wanted that day to be about him. A wedding day is supposed to be a celebration of love, family, and new beginnings. I had no desire to create tension or make the moment about myself. I was there because I was his father, and despite everything that had changed between us, I was proud of him. Ryan had built a life that looked very different from mine. He valued success, appearances, and the things people could see from the outside. I understood that. Every generation has its own definition of achievement. But over the years, I noticed that Ryan had started measuring people by what they owned, what they accomplished, and how others viewed them. Somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as the person I was and started seeing only the life I had after retirement. To him, I was just an older man living quietly. He saw my small home, my simple routines, and my peaceful days, but he never asked about the years that came before. He never asked about the experiences that shaped me or the people who had once trusted me. I never blamed him for not knowing. After all, I was the one who chose not to talk about those years. I never wanted my past to become a reason people treated me differently. I never wanted my son to respect me because of a title or a position. I wanted him to respect me because of the man I was every day. But that choice also meant Ryan never knew the full story of his father. He never knew about the responsibilities I carried. He never knew about the people I had the privilege of leading. He never knew about the moments that changed my understanding of service, loyalty, and responsibility. All he knew was the quiet life I lived after those years were over. At the wedding reception, I noticed the way Ryan introduced me to some of his guests. It was polite, but distant. There was no pride in his voice. There was no sense that he saw me as someone who had contributed anything meaningful. I tried not to let it bother me. I reminded myself that children do not always understand their parents completely. Sometimes they only see the final chapter and forget there were many chapters before it. Still, hearing my own son describe me as someone who had not achieved much was painful. I could have corrected him. I could have told him about the life I had lived before retirement. I could have explained things he never knew. But I chose silence. Because I knew something important. Respect that has to be demanded is not the kind of respect anyone truly wants. I wanted Ryan to discover the truth in his own way. I wanted him to understand that a person's value is not always visible. And I had no idea that before the wedding day ended, someone else in that room would stand up and reveal a part of my story I had kept quiet for years. After my son's wedding reception began, I found myself standing among people who knew only a small part of my story. To them, I was simply the father of the groom. I was the older man sitting quietly at the table, watching his son celebrate one of the biggest days of his life. And honestly, that was enough for me. I did not attend that wedding expecting recognition. I did not need anyone to know what I had done in the past. I only wanted to see Ryan happy. But as the evening continued, I realized something that was difficult to accept. My son had built an image of me based only on the years he had seen. He knew the retired man who enjoyed quiet mornings and simple routines. He knew the father who gave advice, helped when he could, and always showed up when family needed him. But he did not know the younger version of me. He did not know the years that shaped my character or the people who had once depended on me. When Ryan was younger, I always believed I was giving him the most important thing a father could give: stability and love. I wanted him to grow up feeling supported, not pressured by my expectations. I never wanted him to feel like he had to follow my path or measure his life against mine. So when I left my previous career behind, I simply became his father in a different way. I focused on family. I focused on being present. I focused on creating memories that mattered. I never brought up the responsibilities I once carried because I did not want those things to define our relationship. But over time, I noticed Ryan began looking at success differently. He admired people who had visible achievements. He respected people whose accomplishments were easy to explain in a conversation. I understood why. The world often celebrates what can be seen. But many of the most important things in life are hidden. Patience is hidden. Sacrifice is hidden. The years someone spends helping others are often hidden. That night at the wedding, I watched Ryan move through the room with confidence. He was proud of the life he had built, and I was proud of him too. But when conversations turned toward careers and accomplishments, I felt like I became smaller in his eyes. It was as if my quiet life meant I had not done enough. There was a moment when someone asked Ryan about me. Instead of sharing anything meaningful, he gave a simple answer that made it clear he did not see my past as something worth mentioning. He spoke about me like I was someone who had never really achieved much. I stood there and listened. Those words hurt, not because I needed praise, but because they came from my own son. A stranger misunderstanding me would have been easy to ignore. But hearing it from Ryan reminded me of how much distance had grown between us. Still, I refused to let that moment ruin his wedding day. I reminded myself that people often speak from what they know. Ryan did not know the complete story. He only knew the version of me he had seen. And perhaps I had allowed that misunderstanding to continue because I had stayed silent for so long. Later that evening, I stepped outside for a few minutes. I needed a quiet moment away from the celebration. I looked across the wedding venue and thought about all the years behind me. I thought about the choices I made, the people I had met, and the reasons I never shared those parts of my life with my son. I wondered if I had made the right decision by keeping everything private. But deep down, I still believe that a person's worth should not come from explaining their achievements. It should come from the way they live. What I did not know was that someone at that wedding remembered exactly who I was. Someone who knew the story Ryan had never heard. And before the night was over, that person would stand up and change everything. I stood outside the wedding reception for a few minutes, letting the quiet air remind me of who I was before that evening became complicated. I looked back at the lights inside the venue and heard the sounds of celebration continuing without me. People were laughing, sharing stories, and enjoying the happiness of Ryan and his new wife. I wanted to be happy for them, and I was. But I also carried a feeling I could not easily explain. It was not anger. It was not disappointment. It was simply the sadness of realizing that my own son had only seen a small part of my life and believed it was the entire story. For many years, I had made peace with keeping my past private. I never needed attention. I never wanted people to treat me differently because of what I had accomplished. When I retired, I left behind a world where decisions mattered and responsibilities were heavy. I came home and chose a quieter life. I repaired things around my house, spent time with family, and enjoyed the simple moments I had missed during earlier years. To me, that was not failure. That was a different kind of success. But Ryan did not see it that way. He saw the present without understanding the journey that brought me there. He did not know about the years when my days were filled with responsibilities that extended far beyond my own life. He did not know about the people I had worked beside or the lessons I learned from those experiences. More importantly, he did not know why I chose silence. The truth was, I never wanted my son to feel like he was standing in the shadow of my past. I wanted Ryan to create his own identity. I wanted him to believe that his achievements mattered because they were his own, not because he was connected to anything I had done. A parent's greatest hope is often that their child will go further than they did. I had always wanted Ryan to build a life he was proud of, but somewhere along the way, he began believing that my quieter life meant I had accomplished less. That misunderstanding had grown slowly over the years. It was not created by one conversation or one event. It came from assumptions, from not asking questions, from believing that what someone does today tells you everything about who they have been. I returned to the reception after spending some time alone. I decided that I would not allow one painful moment to take away from Ryan's wedding. I sat at my table and watched my son celebrate with the people he loved. Even though I felt hurt, I still felt proud. That was the complicated thing about being a parent. Even when your child disappoints you, your love does not simply disappear. You still hope they find understanding. You still want the best for them. As the evening continued, I noticed someone enter the reception area. He was a man I had not seen in many years, but I recognized him immediately. General William Carter had a presence that filled the room without needing attention. He had spent many years serving alongside people who understood responsibility, commitment, and sacrifice. When his eyes met mine, his expression changed. He smiled and walked toward me with genuine respect. Ryan noticed the interaction from across the room. He looked curious because he had never seen anyone greet his father that way before. The general shook my hand, and spoke to me like an old friend. He asked how I had been and mentioned memories from years we shared. Ryan slowly moved closer, listening carefully. He had questions, and I could see that he was beginning to realize there was a part of my life he had never known. Then, General Carter looked around the room and said something that caught everyone's attention. He said that there was a story about me that deserved to be remembered. I immediately knew where the conversation was going, and for the first time that evening, I felt uncertain about what would happen next. I had spent years choosing silence, but now someone else was about to tell the story I had never shared. When General William Carter stood beside me at the wedding reception, I knew the quiet life I had chosen was about to collide with the chapter one had left behind. For years, I had kept those memories private, not because I was ashamed of them, but because I never wanted my past to become the reason people valued me. I believe that who we are today matters more than what we accomplished yesterday. But as the general looked around the room and began speaking, I realized that sometimes the stories we keep hidden are not just our own. Sometimes they belong to the people who shared those moments with us. The room became quieter as General Carter addressed the guests. Ryan stood nearby, watching closely. He had never seen anyone speak about his father with that level of respect. The person he thought he understood was suddenly becoming someone he did not recognize. General Carter smiled and said that many people spend their lives chasing recognition, but the truly remarkable individuals are often the ones who never ask for it. He explained that years earlier, he had worked alongside someone who carried responsibility with humility and always placed people before himself. Then he looked directly at me. He said that person was Thomas Reynolds. I could see the surprise on Ryan's face. He looked at me, then back at the general, as if he was trying to understand how these two versions of his father could exist at the same time. The father he knew was the quiet man who enjoyed gardening, fixed things around the house, and lived a simple retirement. The man General Carter described was someone who had spent years earning the trust and respect of others through dedication and character. But to me, those were never two different people. They were always the same man. I simply never talked about one chapter of my life because I did not think it defined everything I was. General Carter continued sharing memories. He did not focus on titles or achievements. He talked about moments when leadership required patience. He talked about times when people needed someone they could trust. He explained that the most important qualities were not always the ones people noticed first. Ryan listened without saying a word. I could tell he was thinking about every conversation we had ever shared. Every time he had assumed I did not understand something. Every time he had looked at my quiet retirement and mistaken it for a lack of purpose. The general's words were not meant to embarrass my son. They were not meant to make Ryan feel guilty. That was never what I wanted. I did not want my son to feel small so that I could feel important. I wanted him to understand something much simpler. Every person has a story that goes deeper than what appears on the surface. After General Carter finished speaking, several guests came over to greet me. Some shared memories from years before. Others simply expressed their appreciation and respect. I accepted their kindness, but inside, I kept thinking about Ryan. More than anyone else in that room, his reaction mattered to me. I did not need strangers to tell me who I was. I had known my own journey for many years. What I hoped for was that my son would finally see me without the assumptions he had carried. Later that evening, Ryan found me outside near the entrance of the venue. The celebration continued behind us, but for a moment, it felt like the world had become quiet. He looked different. The confidence he had carried earlier was replaced with reflection. He asked me why I had never told him. I looked at my son and realized that this was the conversation we had avoided for years. I told him the truth. I said I never wanted my past to become a reason he felt pressure to admire me. I wanted him to know me as his father first. Ryan looked down and quietly said that he had spent years judging a story he never bothered to read. Those words meant more to me than any apology could have, because in that moment, my son was not just learning about my past. He was finally beginning to understand the person who had always been there for him. After the conversation with Ryan outside the wedding venue, I realized something important. The moment that changed everything was not when General William Carter spoke about my past. It was when my son finally became willing to listen. For years, I had hoped Ryan would understand me, but I never wanted understanding to come from embarrassment or pressure. I wanted it to come from a genuine desire to know the person behind the life he had always seen. We stayed outside for several minutes after everyone else returned to the celebration. The sounds of the wedding continued in the background, but our conversation felt more important than anything happening inside. Ryan looked at me and admitted that he had made assumptions about me without knowing the full story. He said that for years he had believed success was something people could easily recognize. He thought it came from impressive careers, visible accomplishments, and things that made others admire you. He never considered that some of the most meaningful lives are built quietly. I listened carefully because I knew this was not an easy thing for him to admit. Pride can be difficult to set aside, especially when someone realizes they were wrong about a person they love. I told Ryan that I understood. I reminded him that everyone has moments when they judge too quickly. We all see the outside of someone's life, but we rarely see everything that happened before that moment. I told him that my greatest lessons did not come from recognition. They came from the people I met, the responsibilities I carried, and the choices I made when nobody was watching. Ryan asked me about the years I spent serving. He wanted to know why I never shared those memories with him. I thought about my answer carefully because it mattered. I told him that when he was growing up, I never wanted my past to become a burden for him. I never wanted him to feel like he had to measure himself against me. Every parent wants their child to create their own identity. I wanted Ryan to succeed because of who he was, not because of anything connected to me. I explained that I had seen many people become trapped by their achievements. They spend their lives trying to prove who they are because they believe their accomplishments are the only things that give them value. But I learned that the strongest foundation a person can have is character. Titles change, careers end, circumstances shift, but the way someone treats others remains. Ryan listened and then said something I will always remember. He said that he had spent years looking at what I had after retirement instead of everything I had lived through before it. He realized he had confused a simple lifestyle with an unsuccessful life. Hearing that from my son meant more than any public recognition I had ever received. Because the truth was, I never needed Ryan to know my history so he could admire me. I only wanted him to understand the values behind my choices. We eventually went back inside, but something between us had changed. The wedding guests were still celebrating, but Ryan was no longer looking at me the same way. He asked questions he had never asked before. He showed interest in memories he had once ignored. For the first time, he was not just seeing the father who had raised him. He was seeing the person I had become through every experience before he was old enough to understand. Later that night, when I returned home, I thought about how unexpected life can be. I had entered my son's wedding believing I would simply be the quiet father standing in the background. I never imagined that a few words from an old friend would open a door between us that had been closed for years. The general had not changed my value. He had only reminded others of something I already knew. A person's worth does not disappear just because others fail to see it. And sometimes, the greatest moments of healing begin when someone finally takes the time to listen. In the days after Ryan's wedding, I noticed a change that was difficult to describe. It was not something dramatic that happened overnight. It was something quieter. A small shift in the way my son spoke to me, the questions he asked, and the attention he gave when I shared pieces of my life. For the first time in many years, Ryan was not just hearing my words. He was trying to understand them. After the wedding, Ryan called me and asked if we could spend some time together. It was a simple request, but it meant more to me than he probably realized. For years, our conversations had focused on everyday things: work, schedules, family plans, and ordinary responsibilities. We rarely talked about the experiences that shaped who we both became. That afternoon, we sat together at my home, the same place Ryan had once viewed as evidence that I had settled for a smaller life. But now he looked around differently. He noticed the photographs, the small reminders of years gone by, and the things I had collected along the way. He asked questions about moments he had never known existed. I told him stories I had kept private for a long time. I shared the lessons I learned from people who had trusted me and the challenges that taught me patience and responsibility. I explained that leadership was never about being the person everyone noticed. It was about being the person others could depend on when things mattered most. Ryan listened carefully. He told me that he always thought I had hidden my past because I did not want to talk about it. But he realized that I had actually been protecting him from feeling like he had to compare his own life to mine. I smiled because that was exactly what I had hoped for when I made those choices. A parent does not want their child to spend life trying to follow the same path. A parent wants their child to find their own path and walk it with confidence. I told Ryan that every generation has something to teach the next one. Parents pass down experiences, but children also teach their parents important lessons. Ryan taught me that sometimes silence can create distance, even when the reason behind that silence comes from love. Maybe I had been so focused on protecting him that I forgot he might one day want to know more about my journey. We both realized that understanding works both ways. A child should try to understand a parent, but a parent must also give their child the opportunity to truly know them. As we continued talking, Ryan brought up the wedding. He admitted that he felt embarrassed thinking about the way he had treated me that day. He said he had been focused on how others might view him and had forgotten to consider how his words affected me. I told him that I appreciated his honesty. I did not want him to carry guilt forever. I wanted him to learn from that moment and become a better person because of it. That was the most important thing. Growth is not about never making mistakes. It is about having the courage to recognize them and choose a different path. Before Ryan left that afternoon, he thanked me for being patient with him. He said he understood something he had missed for years. A person's life cannot be measured by what is visible today. There are years of effort, sacrifice, and experiences behind every person we meet. I watched my son walk away and felt a sense of peace I had not felt in a long time. The pain from the wedding had not disappeared because someone defended me. It faded because my son finally saw me. And that was something no title, award, or public recognition could ever replace. The greatest reward was not being remembered by people from my past. It was being understood by the person whose opinion had always mattered most. After the conversation I had with Ryan that afternoon, I began to see our relationship in a different way. For years, I had believed that being a good father meant protecting my son from certain parts of my life. I thought keeping my past quiet was an act of love. But I learned something important. Sometimes the things we hide to protect the people we care about can also create distance between us. Ryan did not need a perfect father. He needed a father he could truly know. In the weeks that followed, our relationship slowly began to change. It was not because of one conversation or one apology. It changed because we both started making an effort. Ryan began asking questions, and I began opening doors that had been closed for many years. We talked about moments from my younger days, the people who influenced me, and the experiences that shaped the way I viewed responsibility and family. I never wanted those stories to make me seem extraordinary. I wanted them to help him understand the values that guided my decisions. One evening, Ryan visited me and brought some old photographs he had found among family belongings. He placed them on the table and looked through them with curiosity. Some of the pictures showed parts of my life he had never seen before. He asked about the people in the photographs and the memories behind them. I could see that he was not searching for a title or a reason to be impressed. He was simply trying to understand his father. That meant more to me than anything else. I told Ryan that every person carries a collection of experiences that others cannot see. A quiet neighbor may have spent years helping others. An older person sitting alone may have stories of courage and dedication. A parent may have made sacrifices that their children never noticed. We often judge people based on a small piece of their journey because that is the only part visible to us. Ryan admitted that he had done exactly that. He had looked at my retirement years and assumed they represented my entire life. He had never considered that those quiet years came after decades of commitment and responsibility. He told me that he wished he had asked more questions instead of creating his own answers. I told him that was a lesson everyone learns at some point. We all have moments when we realize we misunderstood someone. The important thing is what we do after that realization. We can hold on to pride, or we can choose understanding. Ryan chose understanding. Over time, he also began sharing more about his own struggles with me. Before, he often tried to appear like he had everything figured out. But now he allowed himself to be honest. He talked about the pressure he felt, the expectations he carried, and the fear of disappointing others. I listened because I finally understood that my son had his own battles that I had never fully seen. Just as he had misunderstood my story, I had sometimes misunderstood his. That was the beauty of rebuilding our relationship. We were not just correcting old mistakes. We were learning who each other really was. One day, Ryan told me that the lesson he learned from the wedding was not about my past. It was about how easily people can overlook the value of someone standing right in front of them. He said that he had spent too much time looking for signs of success and not enough time recognizing character. Hearing that gave me peace. Because the truth was, I never wanted my son to admire a position I once held. I wanted him to respect the person I had always tried to be. A father who loved him. A father who supported him. A father who believed that kindness and integrity mattered more than recognition. Looking back, I realized the wedding did not change my life because someone revealed my history. It changed my life because it gave Ryan and me a chance to begin again. Sometimes the strongest family bonds are not the ones that never experience distance. They are the ones that find their way back after being tested. And for the first time in many years, I felt that my son and I were no longer looking at each other from opposite sides of a story. We were finally standing together, writing a new one. As the months passed after Ryan and I rebuilt our relationship, I started to understand that the greatest changes in life do not always happen during the moments when everyone is watching. The wedding was the moment when the truth came into the open, but the real healing happened afterward, in the ordinary days when two people chose to understand each other. For the first time in years, I felt like I was not just Ryan's father. I felt like I was becoming his friend as well. We began creating new memories together. Sometimes we would meet for lunch at a small restaurant near my home. Other times, Ryan would stop by on a quiet afternoon, and we would talk for hours about life, family, and the lessons we had both learned. Those conversations became something I looked forward to because they reminded me that relationships are not repaired through one grand moment. They are rebuilt through consistency, patience, and effort. One afternoon, Ryan asked me if I ever regretted not telling him about my past sooner. I thought about that question carefully. There was a time when I might have answered differently, but I had learned that regret often keeps people trapped in moments they cannot change. Instead, I told him that every decision we make comes from the understanding we have at that time. I believed I was doing what was best for him. I wanted him to grow without feeling pressure from my experiences. But I also admitted that I could have shared more. I could have allowed him to know more of the person behind the role of being his father. Ryan appreciated my honesty. He told me that he realized parents are not just parents. They are people with dreams, challenges, memories, and stories that existed long before their children arrived. That realization touched me because it was something many people do not understand until later in life. We often forget that our parents were once young. They had their own hopes, fears, and difficult decisions. They carried responsibilities we may never fully know about. They were not simply the people who raised us. They were individuals with entire histories of their own. I shared with Ryan that my greatest lesson from all my years was that recognition is temporary, but character lasts. A person may receive honors, achieve important goals, or earn the respect of others, but those things are only meaningful if they are built on honesty and compassion. I told him that the most important moments of my life were not the ones where people noticed me. They were the moments when I helped someone, supported someone, or made a difference in a way that no one else saw. Ryan listened and told me that he finally understood why I lived the way I did after retirement. He said he once thought I had stepped away from life because I had nothing left to accomplish. Now he saw that I had simply chosen a different kind of purpose. I had chosen family. I had chosen peace. I had chosen to spend my time on the things that mattered most. Hearing those words from my son gave me a feeling that was difficult to describe. For years, I never wanted him to know me because of a title or a past achievement. I wanted him to know me because I was his father. And now, that was finally happening. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized the greatest lesson was not about success or failure. It was about perspective. People can misunderstand each other for years when they only see one part of a story. But when we choose to listen, we give each other the chance to be understood. Ryan once believed my quiet life meant I had fallen behind. Now he understood that a meaningful life is not always the loudest one. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who do not need to announce what they have done. They simply continue living by the values they believe in. My story was never about proving that I had accomplished something. It was about showing that every person deserves to be seen beyond the surface. And the greatest honor I could ever receive was not from a room full of people who knew my past. It was from my son, who finally took the time to know my heart. Years have passed since that wedding day, but I still remember the lesson it taught me. Not because of the painful words I heard, or because of the moment when General William Carter reminded everyone of my past. I remember it because that was the day my son and I finally stopped looking at each other through assumptions and started seeing each other as we truly were. Before that day, Ryan believed he knew my story. He saw the quiet home, the simple routines, and the peaceful retirement years. He believed those things represented everything I had become. But he never understood that a person's life is made up of countless chapters, and the final chapter does not erase everything that came before it. After we rebuilt our relationship, I began to see my son differently too. I realized he was not trying to hurt me. He was trying to understand the world using the examples he had been given. Like many people, he had been taught to measure success by what could be seen. He thought achievements needed to be displayed and recognized. He did not understand that some of the most meaningful contributions are often made quietly, without applause or attention. I was grateful that we both had the chance to learn from each other. Today, when Ryan visits me, we do not just talk about the past. We talk about the present and the future. We share our thoughts, our challenges, and the things that matter most. The distance that once existed between us has been replaced with something stronger. We built a relationship based on honesty rather than assumptions. One of the things Ryan told me that I will always remember was that he wished he had known my story earlier. I told him that the timing was not as important as what we chose to do after learning the truth. Some lessons come when we are ready to understand them. Some relationships become stronger after they have been tested. What matters is having the courage to take that first step toward each other. I also learned something about being a parent. We spend so much time trying to prepare our children for life that we sometimes forget they also need to understand us as human beings. Children see their parents as guides, but parents are also people with experiences, hopes, and memories that deserve to be known. Sharing those parts of ourselves does not make us weaker. It creates deeper connections. Looking back, I no longer see that wedding as the day my son misunderstood me. I see it as the day we were given an opportunity to understand each other. The general did not change my worth that evening. My worth had always existed. He simply helped reveal a story that my son had never taken the time to discover. But the most important part of that story was never my career, my responsibilities, or the respect I received from others. The most important part was the relationship I had with my son. In the end, every person wants to be seen for who they truly are. Not just by strangers, not just by the world, but by the people closest to them. I spent many years believing that protecting my son meant keeping certain parts of my life hidden. Now I understand that sometimes love also means opening the door and allowing others to know us completely. Ryan did not need a perfect father. He needed a real one. And I did not need a son who admired my past. I needed a son who understood my heart. That is the legacy I hope to leave behind. Not a title, not a position, not a list of accomplishments, but the memory that I loved my family, I stood by my values, and I always believed that understanding was more powerful than judgment. Because in the end, the greatest honor of my life was not being recognized by hundreds of people. It was being truly known by my own son.